Our next talk is Doug Vincent. Doug's here. He's getting wrapped up. Doug is a trained engineer whose interest has taken him to develop pulsatile flow pump designs. Doug has helped develop other medical devices, has worked with leaders in many of our top societies that perfusionists participate in, like the ATS, AMSEC, the SIO, ELSO, ISLT, STS. Any ones that I've missed, Doug? Often in my experience, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between company engineers and those that practice on these devices. But Doug's been a great example of one who listens and implements based on our clinical needs. So again, Doug Vincent on the early evidence supports potential benefits of VentriFlo, true pulse pump for extracorporeal blood pumping. Doug Vincent, I know.
Okay, nice to see you. That was a mouthful. And I said, what did you say? No, I do like to listen. So welcome. Thank you. It's really great to be here. So I started designing medical devices in 1989 and fell in love with how hard and challenging it is, how slow it is. But when you get it right, it can be very meaningful. So I'd like to share with you some of what I've come to learn about the difference between continuous flow and pulsatile flow, especially in extracorporeal circuits. So I hope you find some of this interesting. Of course, disclosures. VentriFlo is not yet cleared, but we're close. Just a little more fuel in the tank and we'll be there. For human physiology, all of the body's biology is based upon pulsatile flow. When the heart beats, the left ventricle ejects into the elastic arterial tree, and that blood moves downstream, but it also stretches and then relaxes the elastic arterial tree, which is lined with endothelial cells. Important things are happening there. So that flow creates pressure, and it happens at a natural rhythm and with a rest in between each stroke. And so there's an interesting question. If that's how biology is for all humans, why don't we do that for ECMO and CPB? Well, one key reason is, of course, today, no ECMO or CPB systems are able to deliver at any price a true pulse. But Mother Nature relies on this, shouldn't we? So what is the function of a true pulse? What is a true pulse? Well, we talk about this Windkessel effect, that when the left ventricle ejects into the elastic arterial tree, it stretches and relaxes. About half of the stroke volume is stored in that stretch and relax. But it's cycling these endothelial cells that are producing important neurohormonal compounds and are sending signals both at the system, the regional, and the local level. Those endothelial cells are very pressure, cycle, and flow sensitive. So when we disrupt that, say with continuous flow, they stop doing the things they're supposed to and start doing things that they shouldn't. And what that results in, with continuous flow, more and more research is showing that about 20 to 30% of capillaries deep in the body, the kidney, lung, brain, and guts, they drop out because they're not getting the proper signaling or the proper secretions from this expansion and relaxation of the elastic arterial tree. From my perspective, that's part of why continuous flow has been proven in the last 5 decades to be much, much, much better than no flow at all. But it's only a 70% solution. If you want to get better, and that's my job as an engineer, to how do we close that gap between a 70% solution and something that we were born with from the womb on? An important little tidbit, when that 20 to 30% of capillary beds has dropped out, that portion of your body is holding its breath for 1, 2, 3, 6 hours. That's a problem. So for human physiology, what the pulse waveform does, there's 3 key elements. A complete stroke volume. For a 10-kilogram kid, that may be 10 cc's. For a 50-kilogram kid, that may be 50 cc's. At a natural cadence, and then with rest period in between. Continuous flow takes and stretches the elastic arterial tree and holds it there. And those endothelial cells never get a chance to relax. And that physiologic rest is key. So when all 3 of these are delivered into the elastic arterial tree, Only then can proper blood flow be achieved. Now, some of the exciting work from my perspective is when people take CPB and combine that with an intra-aortic balloon pump, and the SDS is looking at this for reduction of acute kidney injury, and they've come out with some, I think, class 2 recommendations that favor pulsatility, that if you're already on for a heart transplant, say if you're already on an intra-aortic balloon pump, leave that patient on with an intra-aortic balloon pump throughout the heart transplant procedure, and they will have reduced risk of acute kidney injury. Here's a study that just came out on post-cardiotomy shock patients out of Germany, about 200 patients, that showed for those patients with VA ECMO, they had about twice the number of patients weaned, half the rate of AKI, and about twice the survival when they added intra-aortic balloon pump to the VA ECMO. Now, of course, there are two systems to be maintained there, and the intra-aortic balloon pump is what I would call a pressure-based pulse instead of a volume-based pulse like the native heart gives. So the simulated pulses that you can try to coax out of a centrifugal pump, or by adding an intra-aortic balloon pump, or by turning up and turning down a rotary roller pump, you never get that period of no flow in between each stroke. And so you don't get the full relaxation and the resetting of the nervous system and the secretions in the endothelial cells. So a complete stroke volume and cyclic rest are essential for a true pulse. And that's what we designed VentriFlo to be, just like the left ventricle. So soon we'll all be asking, what's the stroke volume of your pump? So very quickly on VentriFlo. So we deliver a true pulse through an oxygenator. It's hemocompatible, and we reduce or eliminate the risk from continuous flow, from possible overpressure, tubing spallation, heat generation, backflow, and by any high shear or crushing of the red cells. Now, this is a little odd in front of a room full of folks, but I've got one up in my room if you'd like to come see it. But it is an open invitation. I see some of you out there that are kind of at the AMSEC meeting were kind enough to come up and join me in the room, not all at once, but that they came up and can see it, touch it, feel it. It is different. It's not a centrifugal pump. It's not a roller pump. It's a third, and we like to think, better way. We've put a lot of time into the graphical user interface. What you're seeing on that red line with the pink underneath, that's the actual flow. Pulse and relax. Pulse and relax through an oxygenator. We have flow and bubble sensors, level sensors, pressure sensors, ECG synchronization, more than 60 minutes of battery life. Right on the side is a quick manual driver that if you need it, you can deploy that. And the perfusionists that we've worked with at Cleveland, at Mass General and others, they're very happy with how well VentriFlo manages air. So we've been very fortunate and increasingly getting invitations to go into some preclinical studies at just some terrific sites where they're clearly focused on what can they do to improve patient and organ perfusion, and how do we feed that back into the engineering process to create a better system for perfusion. We've done almost 24 animals in Dr. Fukumachi's lab at the Cleveland Clinic, Cardiovascular Dynamics lab, looking at extended 6-hour CPB. Dr. Fukumachi is very clear that if we can deliver physiologic pulsatility through an oxygenator, we can improve organ perfusion and decrease morbidities such as AKI. So this is what, these are charts of the waveforms from the pump, as well as what you see and this is a carotid of a pig, delivering through an oxygenator. And I've been told, I don't know how many hundreds, maybe thousands of times, everybody knows you can't deliver a pulse through an oxygenator or cannula. Well, it turns out you can if you push firmly but slowly. It's like a gentle syringe. If you put 30 cc's in on one end, 30 cc's comes out the other. Yes, there's pressure loss along the way, but we get, for the first time, that 30 cc's into the elastic arterial tree to get the right cycling and signaling from the endothelial cells. Now, this is looking, when we compared it to RotaFlow, same average flow rates, same average mean arterial pressure, but in the carotid of the pigs, it's statistically significant that you could see that we delivered the pulse where there wasn't one before. And so again, we delivered 30 cc stroke volume almost, and of course none for continuous flow. Now you quickly ask, well, what about the plasma-free hemoglobin? What happens as the red cells go past the oxidator and through the cannula? Well, here we're essentially equivalent to RotaFlow in that circuit for 6 hours, same hematocrit. Some work we're doing right now, which is really exciting for me, at Mass General, is looking at isolated heart perfusion. This is a pig heart. This is a setup. And they're getting more and more excited about our ability to keep hearts alive outside of the body. In fact, just Monday, we did it for 12 hours. That's our longest run since. And so what we do is we counterpulse to what the native ventricle is doing in the box. And so what you see on that pressure trace is that the large hump is from VentriFlo, and then the small hump, this is an unloaded Langendorf heart. You see the pressure pulse from the heart contraction. And so we can tune where our delivery is to feed the coronary arteries on that heart. See if the gods of video will work. You might get to see it work. This is after 5 3/4 hours. Looks pretty good to me. Last fall, Dr. Bartlett invited us out to his ECLS lab to look at, in a VV ECMO case with no systemic anticoagulation. We went, after the cannulation, we went 8 hours at 1,000 mLs a minute, then went another 8 hours at 500 mLs a minute, and then at 2 hours at 100 mLs a minute, which was, basically nothing. And we clotted after 2 hours, so 18 hours total, no systemic anticoagulation. The only thing keeping the circuit, the pump, and in that case, the Terumo FX05 oxygenator cleared for that 18 hours was the power of the pulse. Now, when you're having pulsatile flow, if you're at a liter a minute, your peak flows may be 3, even though sometimes it's 0. It seems that peak of 3 helps keep everything clear. And yet there's a relax and reset that happens during the off time as well. So we're pretty excited about what this may mean. We got invited down to Dr. Fraser's lab in Brisbane and set up on their adult mock circulatory flow loop that was set up in left heart failure. And we compared counterpulsed VA ECMO with VentriFlo versus continuous flow VA ECMO. And for the same flow rate, what we found is that there was less demand on, in this case, the pneumatic left ventricle. So another way to say that is the first liter of counterpulsed VA ECMO flow from VentriFlo did not reduce the stroke from the weakened left ventricle. And so combined, we were getting, 4.7 liters a minute. That's pretty exciting. In fact, I think it may start to open up a new door for low flow VA ECMO, 1.5 liters counterpulsing the heart. And again, I'm a simple engineer, even if MIT tried to train me, but when you turn up continuous flow, the more you turn that up to help the ailing heart, the more you're shutting down an aortic valve. It's kind of dumb as a rock. If you can counterpulse, let the weakened left ventricle do its ejection, and then bring the VentriFlo to bring its ejection, but push against the closed aortic valve. And some of what that's showing is that not only can you help the body by delivering 2 pulses, and maybe less need for left ventricle vent, but also you get better perfusion of the heart. When the heart is relaxing in its diastolic phase, and that's when VentriFlo pushes into those coronaries, you're changing that pressure volume area, reducing the stroke work as well as the potential energy, the PVA, so that you have some combination between 10 and 20% improvement for the same systemic support. There's still lots to learn and still lots to prove here, but from my perspective, that's a very exciting use of counterpulse via ECMO. So to start to wrap up here, pulsatile flow has a positive impact. It's not just average flow and average pressure, but what happens, how you get that flow there. Like a lot of things in medicine, it's dose and delivery dependent. So while if I gave you a quarter aspirin, your headache doesn't go away, you could say aspirin doesn't work, or bival. You give too small, bival. Doesn't work. We have to give the right dose and the right delivery. That's the same with pulse. You're trying to do something that the body's biology is based on for all of the proper secretions and signaling. And that affects brain, heart, kidneys, the microcirculation throughout, especially in the gut. Preserves the blood pH and reduces inflammation by some combination of reducing those that are pro-inflammatory and accentuating those things that are anti-inflammatory. So our goals for VentriFlo are to help recover the heart and the body, and so in VA ECMO to augment, not fight the left ventricle. In the case of VV ECMO, if we can continue to demonstrate that we need lower anticoagulation or no anticoagulation, less bleeding. And for CPB, I think there's a huge opportunity to reduce the $6 billion spent each year on post-surgical complications that, while no one's completely sure where they come from, a lot of them are related to potentially bad blood flow. And if 20 to 30% of the capillaries drop out with continuous flow, I got an idea where that's coming from. And that's what we'd like to try to fix, to reduce the rates of AKI, lung injury, gut injury, and brain injury. Our goal would be to redefine outcomes for patients and healthcare systems. Thank you.